connectivity as part of, and data and information. With electric vehicles and hydrogen vehicles, and Chris, you'll be probably best to kick this one off. Data is important, knowledge is power, and if you don't understand what your fleet's doing, how can you support them?
Okay, well, it's fairly straightforward in that the process involves looking at what you do currently and analysing how you currently operate, and then crunching those numbers to then understand out of the universe of assets that you have, which of those assets are candidates for adoption, electric vehicle adoption, and without understanding what you're doing in the current environment, it's difficult to make those decisions. So a key part of the process is to make sure to have the complete fleet connected, and once you have a picture of over an extended period of time, you're then able to begin to look at things like, in the most basic sense, you can optimise the kind of journeys that you're making, for example. So you could look at deliveries that you're currently making, and if you're not applying any sort of optimisation process to that, you could optimise the existing deliveries to say, well, if we did it a different way, we could save 10% on our fuel spend, for example. Which has got to be a good thing, because then that obviously correlates into 10% less CO2 emitted. Considering not just the mileage and the operation of the vehicles, but the potential for recharging those vehicles, whether that's at the beginning and end of day, or actually throughout portions of the day as well. So what infrastructure is available, what kind of loads they're carrying, obviously that has quite a big impact. And then things like topography, so not just looking at geographical distance, but if you're operating in Bristol, for example, there's a lot of hills in Bristol, and that's going to have a big impact on your EV's range. The clever part then becomes taking that data and kind of mining it to be able to understand what are the actionable insights from that. The future lies with closer partnerships with manufacturers, because no doubt the data that Steve's organisation has access to is far richer than we'll ever be able to get access to. It really, the power of the data is in being able to kind of drill down and identify the important stuff, nuggets of information, and get some real clarity as to what the actionable insight is from data. So just generating masses of data actually doesn't help you run a better business, but being able to kind of really focus on what's valuable and deciding what your business goals are around that data. Those are the key things.
I think in terms of supply and demand, there are very few people who are asking for these bigger trucks, because at the minute Euro 6, like we were speaking about earlier, low emission zones, etc. Anything older than Euro 6 is affected, anything that's Euro 6 or newer isn't. So there's no real sort of push, government or otherwise, for that. So people aren't going to change unless they're almost forced into it, unless they're very forward thinking.
The jury is out is which way you go and when you have to do it. So the Committee on Climate Change report that came out last week, in fact, I think is a game changer in this, because up to then, when we were looking at an 80% reduction, actually a lot of the energy system modelling work said you don't need to fully decarbonise freight, and a lot of the things were going towards CNG, which gets you halfway there. They are the most difficult thing to decarbonise in almost the whole of the electricity system. So if you're on a downward slope, you won't do those straight away. So I think there's an issue over time there and when things need to happen. And I think the barriers are high as well if you are looking to move over to a fuel cell hydrogen vehicle. We've been looking at a concept of hydrogen transport clusters that says that actually you're probably best starting at a point where you've got a supply of hydrogen, and some of the big industrial areas in the north of England have got that, for example. They tend to have quite some large fleets, particularly around some of the ports there. So there are probably fairly natural places to start, rather than, if you like, trying to go with a big bang and cover every operator and every goods vehicle in the whole thing.
So I think electric gets all the headlines, doesn't it? And I agree with a lot of what Andrew's saying. It seems like electric probably isn't going to solve the heavy fleet problem, just because the weight of batteries and the size that takes up, and you start losing loading space, or you're very limited on range. I don't hear nearly as much noise about things like hydrogen or CNG. I mean, you're out and about as much as anyone. And clearly the actual vehicle technology needs to come along at the same rate as the infrastructure that supports it, hence the clusters idea seems very sensible. And people's appetite to change. I mean,
we need to think beyond vehicles and charging, the physicality of charging. We have to think further back into the infrastructure and the grid capacity. We need to think bigger than just vehicle availability, cost of charging infrastructure. We need to think grid capacity. That's going to be absolutely massive. So I think securing investment for vehicles, you can make the business case stack up, but it takes longer. It's 5 to 7 years, which I think is fair to say, based on the people I've been speaking to. Charging infrastructure, again, is expensive, but there are options coming in, so not necessarily vehicle-wise, but sort of mobility as a service. So sort of like similar to how you pay for your phone, there are funding options available where you can pay X amount per month or X amount per day for that physical charging infrastructure. But if you've got a site that's so far away from the substation that you get a trickle of electricity, it's pointless. It's absolutely pointless. There's nothing that you can do other than pay for that upgrade. And if you pay for that upgrade, it only puts you up to a certain threshold. And if you pay for that upgrade, other people, from my understanding at least, can then use that available capacity. So I can't see big businesses fronting that amount of money for infrastructure upgrades. If we decide electric is the way to go, then we have to make that choice, which is fine, but we also have to accept that there are significant costs that come along with it.
That's a good point. I think what we need to aim at is more on the manufacturing of these vehicles. We need more products out there that we can buy. They need to supply what we need to do the job, really. We're all keen on going all electric, but if the product's not there, we can't buy it. It's as simple as that.
I think legislation drives change, if I'm honest. And so what John just said there was exactly right about the plug-in hybrid grant being removed. When you see plug-in hybrid sales drop off in the UK almost instantly. I mean, and if you look at the consumers, you look at cars and electrified cars and where that has, I think the demand is driving that. And actually now, as we want to think about our planet and sustainability, this is exceptionally important to us all. And I think and it's not saying it's in vogue, but it is, it's definitely something that we're all thinking about. I talk to many different fleet managers, and everybody wants a car that can do 300 miles now. You don't want to wait, but it's coming, and actually, but then also we don't want an electric car, dare I say it, looks like an electric car. We want an electric car that looks like a car that I want to own, because actually in the UK we still want a car that is our personality, our persona, ejects our persona really. So and that is definitely that is coming. You certainly look at Volvo. So our plan is we've also got a couple of targets by 2025. So I'm not sure if that is a Swedish thing. Yeah. Actually, maybe they got together on this. I'm not sure. But yeah, so our plan is that we'll have 1 million electrified cars on the road by 2025. And that 50% of all of our sales will be fully electric as well. None of us want to be stuck anywhere, and that's why hybrid was so important in the move to fully electric, to get people to experience it, to realise they can do, and your driveway becomes your petrol station, your fueling station, isn't it?
But actually, I think there's probably two markets for it. There's the people who do buy it and just do lots of urban stuff. A lot of fleets, I think, went plug-in hybrids because of the incentives, but then they ended up spending 90% of their mileage running on petrol.
Yeah, definitely. There are certain things that actually policy can do to drive behaviours, and that's what we've got to always be mindful of when we are implementing, is what is the right policy to drive the behaviours in the drivers that we want, because all of us around this table, you know, will look for, you know, the best route or the financially the best way for us to do something. And actually that's just human behaviour. But actually we need to support and make sure we drive the right behaviours.
One thing that was mentioned earlier about the data, obviously a lot of fleet operators have their own TMS systems. Something that we struggle with is getting hold of data, and that's a challenge because the data tells us where the problems are and then we know what the solutions are.
I predominantly obviously work with British Airways, and they're stuck at the minute. They're not sure which direction to go in because they've got equipment which isn't sort of standard vehicles. They are unique, and at the moment there's no easy way around it. Technology of the batteries are getting better, but they find that to charge these vehicles they need a long cycle. You can't just half charge a vehicle because that actually damages the batteries and you don't get the same life of a battery. You know, the prices are actually going up as well for batteries. The metals inside them. We've seen a slight increase in the battery pricing, which is causes other issues. You know, when you're buying, you know, British Airways have they've got a fleet of 300 battery ETs. You know, that's a lot of vehicles.
We talk a lot about shared ownership being the new model for cars and vans, and having not your own car, but sharing a car. So you'll have pool cars essentially for your housing estate or village or whatever it might be. But even in business, that's not happening. I'm fascinated. Shared ownership, is that something you guys deal with a lot?
Yeah, I mean, you've got the sort of car clubs and things starting to emerge, and they're positive. And then you've got e-car type clubs, in fact one called e-car, for that matter, you know, which are electric only car clubs. My sense is there's still quite a lot of talk, and it's old habits die hard.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think the world is changing. You know, we launched a brand called N last year, which is about an independent, safe way about getting around. But as I said, you know, freedom to move, and that was based on Sunfleet that's been going for 20 years in Sweden. You know, it runs 1,700 cars, and effectively that's car sharing, and that's been going for a long, long time. So, and then, as you say, you then move into the likes of Uber, and I think it is a generation thing, and we are sharing more. You know, whereas you know, in the generation, I'm getting in my car, I'm on my own, I'm listening to my music, and I'm driving that way.
And we do a lot with local authorities, for example, whereby you might have a fleet that manages a housing stock for a local authority, and they've got 300 vans in the yard, which, you know, every day they go out and they fix things on buildings, and they might have a view that all of those vehicles are completely utilised at all times. So, you know, we need all those vans because we've got so much work to do. The only way that you can take a decision to reduce the size of that fleet is to look at some data. So it's not a question of just chucking the data at an algorithm and taking the results from the algorithm as gospel and applying those without talking to the business users and saying, look, this is what the algorithm is suggesting. What is your view?
You know, if you're running a fleet of 50 cars for your 50 sales guys, or sales people, sorry, and you're running a fleet of 50 sales people, and they're covering, you know, similar territories, why is your policy different to your policy? And I think that's all that goes what you're saying, is actually we're all different, companies are all different, and they've all got different ethoses and missions, I guess. I think that's why it's hard to get everybody to collaborate, because we're all very good different ideas of how we want to move forward, really.
I think that a lot of bodies or parties such as Prime Earth as well are doing a lot of good work with the government, holding to account for high emission, in London. They've taken them to court 3 times, I think, and won 3 times, because the air quality is so poor. 9,000 people die a year from poor air quality in London.
again, another 2025 ambition for Volvo is that we will give you a week, a year back.
Oh, you're
Of 3 times. So yeah, so as I said, our ambition is to give people a week back. But well, how are you going to do that? So interestingly, autonomous drive is a massive part of that. And you'll see our first autonomous drive cars being launched early next decade. And again, you know, as we go to the middle of the decade and so on and so forth, a third of our cars should be able to be fully autonomous.
Some of it comes down to concept of ownership or not as well.
Yeah.
The large part of the use of the private car is the fact that you've made that big upfront investment and you want to maximise that asset by using as much as you can. If we're going down the model of less individual ownership and shared transport and more sustainable transport in terms of the pods or whatever you want to refer to them as, then there's every possibility that you would use that when you're doing a shop or the weather's bad, but you could cycle other times because you haven't made that initial large-scale commitment to your own vehicle.
It's not about the mode, it's about the connections. That's what causes the hassle. That's why you like driving a car, because you've got no connections.
Yes.
You know, your connections are walking to your drive and then walking from the car park over from the office.
But I also wonder if this increased personalisation is an increasing isolation. And you slightly miss that random conversation with someone on the train, moving as a group. I don't know, there's something in there that just makes me think,
I think
how good is this? I can see how efficient this could be driven towards, but how good is this? I don't know.
then you've opened up a whole new debate about the art of communication and that effectively it's being lost on a generation. So I think that's the way that we may not understand it, but actually that's the way, you know, where it's ending up really. Just it's a different means of communication, you know, and the you know, this autonomous pods, what have you, is that just a different means of communication?